It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Fernando Arancibia Colau. Professor Arancibia Colau is an assistant professor at the Institute of Applied Ethics at Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile and holds a PhD in philosophy from the same university. His research focuses on the ethics of economics and business, as well as on the philosophical foundations of applied ethics, including metaethics and normative ethics. He also published on the ethics of war, which is an important topic. He currently serves as editor-in-chief of Veritas, which is a journal Scopus Indexed, and as the South America representative of the Society for Applied Philosophy. Dear Fernando, thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, and hello everyone. Good morning. Thanks for your presence. And the title of my presentation is Common Good, Social Welfare Towards an Operational Link. This is a part of my this is a work that is a part of my Fondesit project, which is a project funded by the National Research Agency of Chile. Also have to thank the support of the Fund for Research of the Vice-Rectorate of Research and Pastoral at my university. The structure of the presentation will be as follows. First, I will start with the relation between ethics and economics. Then I will address some topics on natural law, then the common good, then an explanation of the notion of social welfare, the link between the common good and the social welfare, some conclusions and projections, and finally, relation to hope. First of all, the topic of ethics and economics. This research is framed within the relationship between ethics and economics. While there is a growing body of literature on this relationship, such literature is not abundant in development it on the basis of specific ethical frameworks of reference. This is relevant because it's not possible to avoid such frameworks when addressing ethically problematic issues for two reasons. A reflection cannot properly be considered ethical without adequate philosophical grounding. And two, it is within ethical frameworks that the philosophically richest debates takes place, and therefore, where ethics can genuinely contribute to a discipline such as economics. The link between ethics and economics, as understood here, addresses, on the one hand, normative ethical theory, its principles, decision-making methods, fundamental axiological elements, among others. Establishing this link in these terms is relevant because only through a mutual understanding of the scope and limits of each approach can ethics contribute to economics in order to reflect on and eventually resolve the pressing ethical problems that affect it. Among the various fields of economic development, welfare economics is the most relevant in terms of the link between ethics and economics. Welfare economics is a branch of economics that focuses on the well-being of individuals and of society as a whole, analyzing how resources are allocated to maximize social welfare and improve overall living standards. This branch of economics is the most permeable to ethical reflection. insofar as it deals with a notion that has been philosophically developed, namely well-being. Although this conception of well-being in welfare economics is not the same as presented in philosophical discussion, the philosophy of well-being, for example, welfare economics has traditionally been open to be presented in philosophical discussions. Welfare economics has traditionally been open to the consideration of moral values, unlike the so-called positive economics, that branch of economics that seeks to understand, explain, and predict economic phenomena without any intention of prescribing economic reality. For this very reason, from the standpoint of economic science, it is welfare economics that has been traditionally studied problems of inequality and poverty, issues of evident ethical nature and relevance. Natural law ethics will therefore serve as the ethical framework of reference for my analysis of the relationship between ethics and economics, and in particular, the new natural law theory, or also known as the analytic theory of natural law theory. This framework has provided a new understanding of the idea of the common good. This notion refers fundamentally to the social conditions of human flourishing. The common good has been primarily a philosophical and theological notion, whereas social welfare is an economic notion that, as such, takes certain methodological assumptions of this discipline. In this sense, social welfare focuses more on the material conditions of individuals. However, as a specific notion within welfare economics, social welfare is amenable to a more substantive normative consideration, which can be informed by moral philosophy. Natural law now is a normative ethical theory distinct from virtue ethics. This is, of course, a contentious. This is contentious. I mean, it's not evident for everyone that virtue ethics and natural law are distinct. Natural law affirms the existence of a plurality of basic human goods that constitute human fulfillment. These include life, friendship, knowledge, aesthetic experience, religion, play and work, and practical reasonableness. The natural law theory has been developed by several authors, among them Germain Grisset, John Finnis, probably the most important theorist of natural law, Joseph Boyle, Robert George, Alfonso Gomez Lobo, Timothy Chappell, and Mark C. Murphy. It is characterized by several key features. First of all, eudaimonism, which is that the core of moral life is the pursuit of eudaimonia, or happiness. Axiological pluralism in the second place. Human flourishing is achieved through the realization, both personal and communitarian, of a plurality of basic human goods. I like classic utilitarianism, which reduces well-being to a single value, such as pleasure. New natural law theory recognizes many irreducible goods. And third place, foundationalism. Basic goods provide the foundations of all actions, decisions, and life projects. Actions acquire intelligibility by being grounded in one or more of these goods. Moral principles and norms are ultimately rooted in them. 4, the incommensurability of values. Basic goods as intrinsic values cannot be measured quantitatively or compared in order to establish compensation or trade-offs. This contrasts with utilitarianism and consequentialist approaches, for which all goods can be weighted against each other. For natural law, for instance, human life cannot be treated as commensurable with other goods, nor can one life be traded off against others, 5 others. So it's completely it's completely nonsense for the natural law ethics to say 5 lives worth more than just one. Perfectionism. As a eudaimonis theory, natural law promotes the fullest development of basic goods. Unlike utilitarianism, which prescribes maximizing total happiness, the natural law theory recognizes the role of prudence, or understood in the Aristotelian sense, and this to avoid misunderstanding. Authors like Pines, for example, speak about practical reasonableness or practical reasonableness. So to avoid human aspect of the word prudence. The deliberative structure of natural law reasoning moves from the identification of these basic goods to first principles, to intermediate principles, and also called these intermediate principles are also called principle of practical reasonableness or prudential principles. Recess talks about modes of responsibility. And finally, to moral norms. In this sense, the goods themselves do not exert moral force unless they are integrated into specific actions and decisions by these principles. So we have basic human goods. Those are values. Then we have intermediate principles. First principles. And those are principles. I mean, they are logically distinct. Those principles, particularly the first principles, are grounded in the basic human goods, in the values. Then we have moral norms. How to apply these basic human goods into moral norms? Through this chain of basic human goods. I mean, first principles reflect a propositional form of these basic human goods. For example, the good of friendship. The good of friendship, it's a value. Thank you. The good of friendship is a value, but the good of friendship needs a propositional form. So the first principle will be the friendship is to be pursued. And then intermediate principles serves as a bridge between moral norms and first principles. For example, the principle of the common good. And then moral norms are the norms that the moral norms are the norms that we usually use in our daily life. So this is it. like the structure of a natural law ethics. This framework is important for 4 reasons. First, it is a periodistic theory of the good. I mean, in the sense that we don't have just one only basic human good, but a plurality of basic human goods. Second, it is not consequentialist, insofar as no single good is reducible to another. Third, it is a developed objective list theory of well-being. I mean, in the theory of well-being or the philosophy of well-being, you have a lot of accounts, and you have hedonistic accounts, you have preference accounts, and so on. So there is a kind of philosophy of well-being that is called the objective list account of well-being. And this objective list account, the name was given by philosopher Derek Parfit. And this theory, this natural law theory, is a well-developed form of theory of basic objective list theory of well-being. In my own work, I have argued that natural law ethics can reconcile subjective preference with objective values by appealing to what I call idealized preferences. These are preferences informed by objective goods and rightly ordered by reason. In this way, utility functions, so central to economics, can be compatible with an objective account of well-being. Then, now we are going to talk about the common good. In the new natural law theory, the common good is understood as an instance of the good of friendship. Human beings are naturally social, as Aristotle recognized, and the political community or complete community emerged from this sociability as a unifying relationship. For John Finnis, friendship is the central or paradigmatic case of this basic good. While weaker or less complete forms, such as business associations or mere political harmony, have friendship on one hand, and other forms of friendship that are more or less perfect, like business relations, political harmony, and so on. Accordingly, for Finnis, the political community has its own common good. I quote Finnis: "The common good is the factor or set of factors which, when present as considerations in a person's practical reasoning, provide a reason for cooperation with others, and from the perspective of others, a reason to their cooperation with each other and with that person." End of the quote. Building on this, Mark Murphy, I think one of the most sophisticated natural law theorists, it identifies 3 conceptions of the common good in natural law theory. First of all, the aggregative conception. For this view, the common good is the aggregate of the individual realization of basic goods. Second, the instrumental conception. For this view, the common good consists in the general conditions for individuals to achieve their flourishing. And the distinctive conception. The common good is, for this view, an intrinsic good of the political community itself, irreducible to the goods of its members, like justice and peace being their prime examples, as Thomas Aquinas suggested. Murphy himself defends the aggregative view, arguing that instrumental conceptions are parasitic of the aggregative conception. They derive their value from the intrinsic goods to which they refer. The distinctive conception, likewise, can be explained by the inherently social character of some basic goods, such as friendship and religion, without positing an entirely separate communal good. Still, Murphy's account has faced criticisms. Christine Cosgard, for instance, distinguished between intrinsic and extrinsic value on one hand, and final and instrumental value on the other. On this basis, one could argue that a good may be both intrinsic, one could argue that a good may be both intrinsic and instrumental at the same time. Moreover, if the common good is a principle of practical reasonableness, and practical reason itself is a basic good for this theory, then this principle must also have intrinsic force, not merely instrumental value. Other philosophers take a more interpretive approach. George Duke, for example, maintains that the three conceptions are not just mutually exclusive, but perform different functions. The distinctive conception justifies political authority, the instrumental conception established rights and duties, and the aggregative conception connects personal and communal flourishing. Jonathan Crowe similarly argues for a complementary understanding, distinguishing between thick and thin conceptions, or substantive versus formal conceptions, and between narrow and wide applications, namely global versus local common good. For Crowe, each community, wherever business, political, or global, possesses its own common good, harmonized with the good of its members. In my own work, I follow this interpretive line. I argue for a thick conception of the common good, since it includes substantive aspects of human flourishing, particularly the basic goods identified by natural law ethics. A merely thin conception will be indistinguishable from formal accounts of social welfare. It also stresses the distinction between local and global common good. Intermediate communities, such as corporations or families, each have their own common good, which must be integrated with the political common good of the nation and with the broader common good of humanity as a whole. Thus, I propose that the common good should be understood as a complex, multi-level state of affairs. Composed of the aggregation or of simpler state of affairs in which individuals and communities flourish, and which at the same time generates duties of cooperation and promotion across different levels of community life. So at this point, the microphone is there. So at this point, maybe some of you are not familiar with the notion of state of affairs. This notion is more related to analytic metaphysics. And there is an author that his name is E.M. Armstrong, and I think he recently died, that distinguished between atomic and molecular state of affairs. So a state of affairs for him is a relation, an instantiation, moreover, an instantiation or of a universal from a particular. So your universal is F, the particular is A. This would be a state of affairs, an atomic state of affairs. Another state of affairs will be a relation between two or more particulars. For example, A relation B. The relation is a universal. Here is a universal. Both are atomic state of affairs. A molecular state of affairs, and that is important because the common good is, or is you a molecular state of affairs, is a combination of more state of affairs. For example, Fa plus Gp plus Hc. That would be a molecular state of affairs. And what is this anything? What is the relation between this and the idea of the common good? Well, F must be a moral property, namely the property of basic human good, mean knowledge. Or life, we must say. Knowledge, life, all the basic human goods that are that recognize the natural law theory. So the particular is a person having knowledge, a person having life. Or we have relational goods, basic human goods. There must be, for example, friendship. So A relation B. Person A is a friend of B. This is, of course, a directional relation. I mean, A is a friend of B if and only if B is a friend of A. So, let us move to social welfare. The concept of social welfare can have several meanings. Informally, it might even be taken as a synonym of the common good. In economics, however, it primarily refers to a social state of affairs in which people consider it collectively achieve the greatest possible satisfaction of their preferences. In this framework, preferences constitute individual utility. In microeconomics, utility is studied in relation to consumption. The welfare of a person consists in maximizing their utility function, and that function is simply an ordering of preferences. Social welfare, then, is the aggregation of individual welfare. This economic conception of welfare is quite different from the philosophical conception of well-being, such as those developed in the natural law theory or in other eudaimonist traditions, which propose substantive accounts of the good. Still, this difference does not prevent the establishment of a systematic link between the two. Indeed, contemporary proposals such as those of Amartya Sen, the capabilities approach, or Matthew Adler, social welfare functions and moral decision procedures, represent non-reductionist ways of approaching welfare, going beyond the preference, satisfaction, and consumption models of traditional mainstream economics. A social welfare function is a tool of evaluation that aggregates individual welfare into an overall measure of social welfare. Just as an individual has an utility function to express her well-being, society has a social welfare function to express the well-being or the welfare, better say the welfare, of all individuals taken together. One of the most sophisticated models of social welfare function has been developed by Matthew Adler. His approach is especially relevant to my project since its assumptions are broadly compatible with natural law ethics and the notion of basic goods. Adler conceives the welfare social function as a modern decision procedure characterized by three features. First, it is a person-centered account because its concern is exclusively with human beings, not with non-human entities. Second, it is consequentialist because it evaluates outcomes, ranking them according to how well they promote welfare. And maybe some of you can question, well, if it is consequential, how this is a good model for natural law ethics. I hope to explain this later. And third, it is welfarist because it focuses specifically on the well-being of person, not on other values. As a decision procedure, Adler's social welfare function is not intended to be a general moral theory like utilitarianism, Kantian deontology, or natural law ethics. Rather, it is a complementary methodology. While ethical theories provide criteria of rightness, the social welfare function offers a way of applying those criteria to a long-scale policy choices. Adler stressed that if ethical theory is to be genuinely normative, it must also provide a deliberative procedure, and the social welfare function can serve this role. There are clear affinities between Adler's model and natural law ethics. Both are person-centered and both place well-being, understood as the realization of human goods, at the heart of ethical evaluation. However, there is also apparent tensions. The social welfare function is usually seen as consequentialist and as requiring commensurability between states of affairs, while natural law theory insists on the commensurability of basic goods and rejects straightforward trade-off. It is crucial to remember that the social welfare functions that the social welfare function is designed for public policy and not for individual moral choices. It provides a methodology for evaluating government and large-scale decisions. Second, no moral theory, whether consequentialist or not, can entirely avoid ordering, and this is important, cannot avoid ordering states of affairs according to its principles. Even in natural law ethics, when one chooses between equally good life plans, for instance, between three possible careers, all developing the good of knowledge, the decision requires practical judgment informed by personal capacities and circumstances. Third, the accusation of pure consequentialism can be mitigated by recognizing that practical reasonableness, a principle of natural law, already acknowledged a limited relevance of consequences. As Finis notes, efficiency is a legitimate principle of deliberation, though always subordinate to the constraints of good basic goods and moral norms. Finally, the welfarist orientation of the social welfare function is not necessarily utilitarian. Adler himself considers capability-based and non-utilitarian conceptions of welfare, which resonate more closely with substantive accounts like those offered by natural law. In this sense, the idea of the common good grounded in basic human goods can serve as an interpretative framework for the social welfare function. It can guide the ordering of alternatives by ensuring that no policy choice directly violates or destroys an instance of a basic good, while allowing freedom and creativity in promoting the flourishing of individuals and communities. Thus, welfare economics and natural law ethics are not antagonistic. By situating the social welfare function within the broader framework of the common good, it becomes possible to combine analytical tools of economics with the normative richness of moral philosophy. I'm on time?
It's 15 to 10.
Okay, so I'm good on time.
10 more minutes.
Okay. Operating efficiency. Is the most widely used method to state social welfare, based on ordinal utility, where a social state is optimal if no one can be made better off without making somewhere else worse off. An alternative, the Calder-Hicks criterion, which introduces compensation. I'm gonna make a little graphic there. The problem with welfare economics is that it has no substantive conceptions of well-being. Individual preferences are taken as given. This is a very big problem of economics, without questioning their moral adequacy. Budget efficiency, while dominant, does not account for equity or justice. So, we have here the utility of I and the utility of J. And this is the Pareto frontier. This is all possible efficient allocations of goods. Let's suppose that we are here. If we are here, then the Pareto optimality is here. But since Pareto optimality is a very difficult state of affairs that we can attain, we have the Calder-Hicks criterion, which is let just be here to here or here or here or here or here or here. So this will be the Calder-Hicks efficiency. And the Calder-Hicks efficiency says that, well, maybe you can be better off and someone could be worse off, insofar as we can hypothetically compensate the worst off. So the problem is that the compensation is an hypothesis, not necessarily a reality. I mean, if the winners, like in economics they say the winners and the losers, if the winners are better off and they are more in terms of numbers, I mean, they are more winners and less losers, well, that's right, that's okay, that's no problem. That's the first problem. And the second problem is that if the Pareto frontier is here, the economists don't They don't care about initial allocations of goods. So, for example, the initial allocation of goods could be here. So, J, the utility of J will be little utility, but then we have this possible little improvements. So this could be a direct improvement. And I will be much more better off, and J will be at the same point. So there is no, the economists, usually mainstream economists, don't worry about equity or justice. They just care about efficiency. How, from this point, we can go to a point of the Pareto frontier or of the other Hicks efficiency. I'm going to finish not with this, but with this. The relation between hope and economics and ethics. One of the main features of hope is the existence of a better world in the future. This hope was seen by the economist John Maynard Keynes. I quote, "I look forward, therefore, in days not so much very remote, to the greatest change which has ever occurred in the material environment of life for human beings in the aggregate. But of course, it will happen rather gradually, not as a catastrophe. Indeed, it has already begun. The course of affairs will simply be that there will be ever larger and larger classes and groups of people from whom problems of economic necessity have been practically removed. The critical difference will be realized when these conditions has become so general that the nature of one's duty to one's neighbors is changed." Keynes is talking about the economic problem and on the distinction between absolute and relative needs. He considers that in the future or present, the basic needs of the people will be satisfied. But this hope has not taken place. Why? In part, the problem relies in the way the economists analyze the economic problem. More precisely, economists are not analyzing the economic problem, as philosopher Khalid Mir has said, but economizing, namely applying the economic method with all its reductionist assumptions to everything on this life. Think, for example, on Gary Becker's economics of the family or the economics of crime. Think there is no economic problem. It is just to economize their reality. I think the failure of capitalism in reaching the end that Keynes saw is caused by the tools of mainstream economic analysis, their reductionism, and their failure to integrate morality. But it will be hopeless to try to eliminate mainstream economics. And this is a very important point. We will do better by trying to dialogue to economists and propose alternatives to mainstream economics. Some of the reductionist assumptions cannot be eliminated, but they can be mitigated. For example, maybe the utility functions will remain subjective, but they can be widely restricted by moral boundaries. And this an example of this, though not completely successful in my view, is capabilities approach that give place to other indexes, just like the Human Development Index, an alternative to gross domestic product. The success of Amartya Sen was possible And, well, he's a Nobel laureate in economics, by the way. The success of Amartya Sen was possible because he made a relation between mainstream economics and moral philosophy. Then, hope of a better life because of the end of economic problem lies in part in a moralization, not only of the economic life, but the economics or economic analysis or economic science. Thank you very much for your attention.